Hello Raptors fans and welcome to Raptors Report. A lot has happened since we last chatted, and I'm excited to break down the entire Raptors offseason. Without further ado, let's jump into the episode and get started. First, let's begin with the reason for the hiatus. If you've been watching the channel or following me on Twitter, you'll know that I recently became a father for the second time. That meant that my parental duties doubled, and I became the primary caretaker for my first kid. With the school year underway, I'm able to take my fatherly duties and dump them on the province of Ontario so that I can bring you the Raptors content that you've been craving. Alright, with that out of the way, let's take a look at the offseason so far. First, let's look at the draft. I made a catch-all episode where I was able to lay out all of the options available to the Raptors prior to the draft, with information on all of the prospects. The Raptors used the 4th pick to select Scottie Barnes, so we'll discuss that. The next thing on the docket was the long-expected Lowry trade. The Raptors traded Lowry to the Heat for Precious Sachiwa and Goron Drajich, so we will talk about that. Next is free agency. The Raptors had a bunch of different options in free agency, which I laid out in my free agency episode. The Raptors decided to go with a very conservative approach, and we'll discuss what they ended up doing. Lastly, we'll look at the roster, and I'll talk about what I expect is going to happen this upcoming season. First of all, let's discuss the draft. While a lot of people were surprised that the Raptors decided to draft Scottie Barnes, he had been on my radar as a potential pick for a while. I gave Scottie about a 20% chance of being drafted by the Raptors, and while that seems low now, he was actually my second most likely option for the Raptors on draft night. Despite assuming Barnes would have an outside chance at being the pick, like most Raptors fans, I was surprised by the Barnes selection. I figured the Raptors would take Jalen Suggs, who most consider to be the safer, more NBA-ready pick. I think in terms of raw upside, it's hard to argue against Scottie Barnes. When it comes to team building, the most coveted asset in the NBA are forward-sized guards. LeBron, Luka, Giannis, Kawhi, Durant, and other premier players show that when you have the rare combination of size, athleticism, processing, and scoring ability, the sky is the limit. The Raptors are betting on their development system to take Barnes and comb out his weaknesses, those being mediocre shooting, unpolished scoring, and being rather raw in many areas, and hone his strengths, which are ball handling, decision-making, and defensive ability. If Scottie Barnes reaches his ceiling, he could become the best player in his draft class. His potential is that high. Barnes has a great feel for the game of basketball, meaning that he has a good chance of absorbing the training and experience and reaching his potential. The issue is that potential appears to be at least a few seasons away. The ultimate best case scenario for Barnes, and I'm not saying it's incredibly likely, is Giannis Antetokounmpo, and his first season in the NBA was unremarkable statistically. He averaged only 7 points per game on 40% shooting in 24 minutes per game, and averaged almost as many turnovers as assists. Now, I'm not saying that Barnes will have that kind of a rookie season, but I expect some growing pains with Barnes, and I encourage people to evaluate him qualitatively in his first season, in that you should look at how he's doing things, what he's capable of, intriguing skills and abilities he could build off of, rather than going purely by stats. I think there will be a decent amount of FOMO when examining the rookie seasons of Jalen Suggs and Scottie Barnes. Suggs appears to be far more NBA ready from a skill point of view, and he will be given a lot of leeway, and likely a starting position on the rebuilding Orlando Magic. Narratives will be formed, talking points will emerge, and your patience as a fan will be tried, but I encourage you to evaluate the pick based on what you think will happen a few years down the road rather than right now. With all of that said, there is one thing that I think Raptors fans can look forward to Scottie doing in the NBA right off the bat, and that is play defense. Scottie Barnes is a physical freak. He has that smooth athleticism and quick foot speed that allows him to stick with offensive players on the perimeter, and the size and strength to battle on the inside and contest shots at the rim. When you see him slide with a player on the perimeter and give a long-armed contest, it's hard not to be reminded of another Raptor, OG Anunoby. The short shorts also don't hurt the comparison. Rookies usually struggle with defense in their first few seasons in the league, but outside of some rookie mistakes, I expect Barnes will be a plus on that end, which should certainly earn him some points with Coach Nurse. Another feature in Scottie Barnes' overall package is his demeanor. The NBA isn't a personality contest, but if it were, Scottie Barnes would be a superstar. He's constantly smiling, yelling, clapping, yelling, juicing his team up with his relentless energy and communication, and did I mention yelling? The man likes to yell. I hate to psychoanalyze people based on a small amount of evidence, but I think all of this points towards Scottie having a big-time motor, and by all accounts, guys love playing with him. Basketball and sports in general reward careful planning and patience. Selecting a player that might need time to reach their full potential can be frustrating for those of us who expect immediate results. But if it works out in the end, it'll all be worth it. Also, before we move on, we've got to discuss the other guys the Raptors drafted with the 46th and 47th pick: Delano, Banton, and David Johnson. Having watched Summer League with both of them, I came away extremely impressed with Delano Banton. Johnson didn't make much of an impression on me, but that's probably because he was dealing with some small injury troubles. Banton looks like a guy with a very good size-to-skill ratio, standing at 6'9" with some standout ball handling and playmaking skills. Banton led the Summer League Raptors in rebounds, assists, blocks, and steals, and was one assist away from converting a triple-double in one of those games. I expect Banton will play most of his games on the 905 this season, but I think the Raptors scouting staff has done it again, and found a gem in the second round. For the next section, let's look at the Lowry trade. I'll say right off the bat that I was a little underwhelmed by the return, but I suppose that I might have had my expectations set a little high. A sign and trade is the last chance saloon to salvage any kind of trade asset, and the Raptors put themselves in that position by deciding to sit out the trade deadline. If rumors of a Tyrese Maxey package from the 76ers at the trade deadline were true, I think the Raptors might have shot themselves in the foot a little bit, because I foresee him being a strong player in the league. So let's look at what the Raptors did get back. The return was Precious Achiuwa and Goron Drajich from the Miami Heat. The lack of draft compensation, I think, is a little troubling, because one of the strengths of the Raptors as an organization is the ability to leverage the draft to find players. There are some reasons to be excited about the return, however. Let's start with Precious Achiuwa. Achiuwa is heading into his sophomore season, with his rookie campaign being a rather unexciting one, playing only 12 minutes per game behind Bam Adebayo and Kelly Olynyk at center. Achiuwa is an interesting prospect because he delivers quite a lot of what the Raptors have been looking for on the defensive end of the court: switchability, large wingspan, rim protection, etc. I think Achiuwa will be a strong defender in the NBA for his career. The issue is on the other end of the court. Despite knocking down a couple of threes in the Summer League, I don't know how much potential Achiuwa has in that department. Last season, Achiuwa was very poor at finishing outside of 3 feet from the basket. What Achiuwa does have is a pretty good face-up driving game. He has a good first step and good ball handling skills, meaning that he can get by larger defenders if he catches the ball at the elbow, and he has the size to punish smaller defenders if they take him on in the post. He draws a ton of fouls because of this face-up game, and also because he's a tenacious offensive rebounder with long arms and a good motor. The foul-drawing ability of Achiuwa could be a huge boon to the Raptors, who weren't very good in that area last season. but the foul drawing will only be a benefit if Achua is able to improve his percentages at the line. Part of the reason Achua's efficiency was mediocre last season was because he was only able to convert on 50% of his free throws, and he shot a lot of them. If he was able to get that figure up to 70-ish%, he could have a valuable role on offense. Because a few things would have to go right in order for Achua to be a plus on offense, I'm looking at him as more of a role player going forward, although potentially a very good one. The Raptors brass are reportedly pretty high on him, so perhaps I'm overlooking a few things, but I see him as a defensive center with potential as a rotation player, which isn't a terrible asset to have, all things considered. I will say that I watched all of the Raptors Summer League games, and Achua was pretty impressive there, but you can't draw too many conclusions based on Summer League alone. The other guy the Raptors got back for Lowry is Goron Drajich. Drajich has been a Raptor villain for a long time now. They've battled him in the playoffs, and they've been on the receiving end of, let's say, some ethically dubious basketball plays. He also has, quote, bigger plans than being on the Raptors this season, as he said in a Slovenian interview, which is both sad and hilarious. I'm not going to go into full Drajich trashing mode because I've already done that, and also because he could very well be playing for the Raptors the majority of this coming season. And honestly, if that happens, he will probably be a solid veteran guard for a team that needs help on the offensive end. Drajich, as a player, can create scoring opportunities for himself and other players. He's a career 37% three-point shooter on good volume. He can run the pick and roll and find other players in their spots. He can penetrate and score at the rim with crafty finishes, and he plays with an edge, as we've all experienced. He would likely either start at guard or come off the bench and be a large part of the Raptors' offensive attack. Defensively, Drajich isn't great. Probably someone you'd like to hide in your defensive scheme, but that said, he's not a complete disaster. There's been some rumors floating around about him and the Mavericks, as that team would love to reunite Drajich with his Slovenian national team compatriot Luka Doncic. John Hollinger suggested that might still be in the cards if the Raptors are waiting for Mavericks big man Moses Brown to be available to be traded in October. Moses Brown is another defensive big man prospect who I'm not particularly high on, but we'll talk about that more if and when it happens. Overall, I'm not too impressed with the return for Lowry, but it does have some interesting elements. For this season, Drajich will probably help them in their playoff quest, and then down the line I predict Achua will be a rotation caliber big man for the Raptors with some upside to be more than that. And that's this week's episode. Next week, I'll be going over the Raptors' free agency, as well as the state of the team, my predictions for next season, and perhaps some thoughts on Raptors training camp. Let me know what you thought of my analysis in the comments, or on Twitter at Raptors Report. Was I too harsh or too kind? I always like hearing from other Raptors fans, so please let me know. Also, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, thanks for watching Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.